Welcome to episode 3 with Dr. Craig Blomberg, answering our 4 Easter questions.
This time round, the question is, can we trust the Bible's account of the resurrection? Is it myth? Is it a tall story? Or is it something that we can know for sure? Now, ladies, did you know that Dr. Blomberg has written over 30 books around Jesus and the New Testament?
Sure, I don't even think I've read 30 books, so this guy's written 30 books. But anyway, let's hear what Dr. Blomberg's got to say.
If it wasn't, then we need to come up with a convincing account for how the testimony arose. Some have said the disciples went to the wrong tomb and found it empty. But then all their critics would have needed to have done is point out the right tomb. Some people have said the women in their grief, the ones who had been waiting and watching and returning, were confused. Somehow the story got garbled. Again, all the critics and skeptics would have needed to do is correct them, point them to the right place. The disciples stole the body. Well, that is the oldest counterclaim. It's one that's anticipated and actually made in the Gospels themselves. But then you have a group of people, a dozen at least, living out a countercultural life, and in all instances, except the Apostle John, finally being martyred for their faith, for something they knew was a deception that they personally spawned. This is different from talking about martyrs for other faiths who are martyred for what they sincerely believe in. The disciples would have known it was a lie. What about all the contradictions among the parallels? Well, we don't have time to take them one by one, but I don't find any of them insuperable. What I do find is there are enough differences of detail and bits of the larger story that are or aren't included to at least move us away from the notion that it was somehow collusion on the part of Jesus' followers. Enough independence in the testimony and agreement on the basics, he was risen in bodily form, that it has the ring of history to it. Or maybe it was just, some others would say, a slowly evolving myth where a harmless Jewish rabbi was turned into, over the decades, a Gentile god. And yet we find Paul in 1 Corinthians chapter 15, a letter written 25 years after Jesus' death, referring back in creedal or confessional-like fashion to what he had been taught and passed on to the Corinthians, almost like a catechism of the fact that Jesus died according to the Scriptures, was buried, was raised according to the Scriptures, appeared to all these people, probably the kind of thing that would have been passed on to him when Saul of Tarsus had his vision on the road of Damascus and became the Apostle Paul within 2 to 3 years after the year of Jesus' death. It all goes back to so early a period. There are other less likely explanations also, but again, nothing that makes as much historical sense. As long as we recognize that science has not disproven a resurrection, it simply adjudicates on things that can regularly be repeated, and miracles by definition can't. And once we throw out that canard, then it's harder. It takes more faith to disbelieve the resurrection accounts than to believe them.
Now, mates, what we've just heard, I think, gives us a fantastic opportunity to speak to our friends this year at Easter. Everybody is so conscious about fake news, being manipulated on social media into what we hear and what we're told, that the reliability and the certainty of the accounts of the New Testament, especially around the resurrection of Jesus, I think provides a relevant bridge for us to make a connection with friends this year.
Yeah. And I think what you can do is just ask them again a simple question. When last did you read the Easter story from the Bible? And depending on the answer, you might want to share our Easter Bible reading guide with them. This is not just for us to grow deeper in our understanding and love for Jesus around Easter, but for the first time, a friend might actually read the Easter story from God's Word, which we just heard from Dr. Blomberg is a reliable and trustworthy source. So there's no better place to go but the Bible.